Today we have Elsa Issac. Oh, Elsa is amazing. Elsa is a New York City-based fashion and image stylist. She dubs herself an anti-fashion stylist because she doesn't believe that there's one standard of beauty, while also striving to empower all of her clients to celebrate their own individuality. I think you can see a through line here of how powerful it is to embrace what makes you different. Elsa is a seasoned pro with over 18 years in the fashion industry. She's an East African born stylist who's built an incredible portfolio, having bestowed her stylish magic on everyone from Marie Forleo to Lenny Kravitz, from Katie Couric to Chris Carr. Pretty cool. In this episode, we talk about how her journey and evolution as a stylist has been such an incredible part of how she shows up in the world and also how she works with her clients. She helps successful career women and entrepreneurs revamp their wardrobe and create show-stopping ensembles to flatter their unique body shapes and their lifestyles. And if you are like me, we're coming out of, hopefully even more so day by day, the confines of being in quarantine, of being under the pandemic dynamic where we aren't necessarily always able to show our full style out in the world. And in this conversation, we really talk about the power of permission, giving yourself permission to step into and to play around to find what your style is, and also to release any kind of shame or expectation that you should know how to do this stuff already. So if you are somebody that has been trying to figure out, how do I want to show up in the world coming out of COVID, or how do I want to show up in the world as more of myself now that I've learned so much over this period of time, this episode is for you. I hope that you enjoy this conversation, and if this resonates with you, definitely reach out to Elsa. She has amazing, amazing resources for you and is an incredible person to work with. So without further ado, here's Elsa. Elsa, welcome to Checkbox Other. I am so happy that you are here. It feels like I saw you a second ago because it was like the last time the world was really open, but it was years ago. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here. So I always like to open this up and say, hey, can you give us the Cliff Notes version of the aha moments, the twist turns in your life that have kind of led you to where you are today and how you see the world? So I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, your story.
Yeah, I mean, Cliff Notes, that's always tough, but
I know, right?
I was born in Eritrea, which is a northeast African country, right above Ethiopia, and it borders the Red Sea. I lived in, before we settled in Canada, we were in Sudan for a little bit and then in Rome. And so, yeah, we settled in Canada, Western Canada and Alberta my family's still there. And I knew from a pretty early age that I wanted to do something with clothing. I didn't know. I think I ultimately decided it was a fashion designer because I think that was what was, pretty wildly known. But I don't know. I don't know how I got it in my head. It really just was something that stuck, like from really early on. Started taking sketching classes. And then at the time, there was only like Vancouver or Toronto for like fashion schools.
Yeah.
And so I started planting seeds to my parents and saying, I think I'm going to go to Toronto. And they'd look at me like, yeah, okay, little girl, you're not going anywhere. But I just wouldn't, like, that's all I talked about through high school. And so, I think in my 12th year of high school, they were like, she's not letting up on this. And so and I also couldn't wait to leave the small town. I don't know how a girl that was born in a village on a mountaintop wanted to live in a big city. I don't know where that came from, but I was ready. Like I was like anxious to like live my life as an adult, making my own decisions and really just ready to get out in the world. And so, yeah, I moved to Toronto when I was 18, and it was when I was probably in my second year, I think it was, where I was working at a bank to support myself part-time. And a friend of mine who also worked at the bank was in the music industry. And he was like, hey, Elsa, we're doing a music video for so-and-so, and we'd really love to have you style the video. And I didn't know what a stylist was. I think this is around 2002. So I was like, thank you for thinking of me. That's very sweet. Like, but I'm in fashion. I don't know what a stylist is. And I don't do that. I'm still in school. And he would not let it go. I don't know why. he just was so insistent. And so that was really how I fell into styling. I ended up styling like 12 people on that first gig. It was really overwhelming, but I remember he gave me a credit card and said, go shopping. And so that was my first intro to styling. And I discovered that I was good at it really quickly, because you had to do it multiple times for the people involved. And then he handed me a check at the end of that very long day and said, I knew you could do it. And so that was kind of how I landed in styling, and I've been doing it ever since. He ended up hiring me a bunch of times. So it was kind of something I never expected, you know, like again, it wasn't something I dreamed of doing, but I think I was just open. I feel like we're much more open to things when we're younger. And I was like, okay, you know, what's if he insists, you know, at least I told him no if I screw it up, you know. And then I ended up moving here shortly, a few years after, just because I knew the industry was a bit bigger here in New York.
You know, it's so funny, the kind of that nudge from somebody that sees in you what you don't necessarily have the opportunity to see in yourself until you witness it is so incredibly powerful. And it's funny because as you were just saying that, I was like, that's what you do for people. Like, you're like, try this on. I know, like, this will be just, I know it's outside of what you're willing or allowing yourself to do and step into, but like, I see it for you, and it unlocks all this. You're like, this is amazing. And so being able to bear witness to like that magic that person saw inside you is just such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
That's
how
true.
Like, as you're like, I just think of early 2000s. I mean, music videos were like, though they've come back a little bit, they were like it. And like the idea of kind of creating and crafting what is like setting the stage. And you have to set the stage in so many different ways to tell a story of like 3 to 5 minutes of a movie. How did, you know, as you were thinking about doing that, how did you, again, like, as you're like, okay, I'm going to learn how to be a stylist, but also I'm going to learn how to be a costume designer as well. And, you know, all these other elements that are fitting into the overarching like story being told. How did that kind of play into what sounds like as a child, you had such a wonderful imagination for this stuff too?
Yeah, I wish I remembered what my it would have been like. I think it just would have been a really cool thing to know in detail what I was thinking. I do remember that obviously there was a video director and there was a treatment. So a treatment is outlines like what happens in the video and the theme of the video, and so just using that, talking to the director and getting a lot of guidance from them and him and just everyone really. But I had no idea, like, especially, you know, seeing it from this perspective and knowing everything that is required to show up with options. And I don't know how I did that. I really don't, like, for that many people. I mean, I do remember, I'm sure I got a lot of guidance from you know, the director, my friend, and of course the artist himself. And I remember talking to everybody too that I was gonna be styling and hearing what they were comfortable with. But it's a different perspective, right? Because when I thought about being a designer, which was the goal, you're kind of creating it from scratch, right? Like it's kind of like this idea in your head that comes almost out of nothing. And then this was like looking for already like clothing that already existed and, you know, was the best fit for the project, for the person. And so I think I just did it scared. You know, I did it scared, and I just decided that it was going to be whatever it was going to be. I think I probably overanalyze now because I know everything that's at stake and, you know, all the things, but there's something to be said about like really just jumping and, you know, I was definitely more, I felt that I would be okay. Like I was more free about jumping and letting myself figure it out. So,
I love that. You know, it's funny because on one of I love on your website how you have the kind of, here are the facts about me. And, you know, things you might not know. And one of them, you talk about how powerful miracles are in your life. And I feel like there's a part of this that's like that buoying support behind you that is probably not necessarily visible, but you feel that level of, okay, if I jump, there is proof from the universe or proof from whatever you believe that it's supporting you. Can you talk a little bit about how you talk about miracles being such an important part of not just your life, but kind of the fabric of your family, and how that has kind of shifted or I would say even kind of defined the way that you're looking at the world or operating within it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, everyone has a story. And I think for me, what has helped motivate me and just really, I'm constantly reminded of how much gratitude I have for so many things that happened. I mean, my parents fled a war-torn country. I was, you know, I was almost killed at like 5 months old, and my mom almost died having me. And, you know, like literally we all have an almost died story.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're coming from us specifically, like as immigrants, there was a lot of loss. You know, both my parents had lost significant role models and people in their lives, and for them to just raise 3 children successfully is a miracle in and of itself, you know. Because I'm like, how, you know, I have a 5-year-old, and literally within weeks of having him, I apologized to my mom. I was like, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. She's like, for what? I'm like, all of it, just all of it. Because I don't understand how they survived with all the trauma that is still there. I mean, like therapists weren't a thing.
Right.
You know, or even the idea of therapy, and to not just survive, but thrive in a completely different world without your parents, without your, you know, like, I just don't get it. I don't understand how that happened and how they did it, but I'm super grateful. And I think that was a lot of my risk taking came from. I was just like, dude, like, I almost died, or my parents, like, I'll be okay. Like, whatever happens, I'll be okay. And I think that's kind of it's really extreme, but also it has helped me take a lot of the risks that I don't think, you know, if my story was different, that I would have taken. So I'm super grateful for it. And I think, like, just understanding, you know, every day I wake up and I'm like, oh, I don't have to worry about, I mean, there are issues in this country, but like,
just a couple,
just a little, but, you know, I don't have to worry about a bomb dropping, you know, on a daily basis, or I don't have to worry about, like, you know, enemy soldiers coming in, and like all these things, all these reasons why my parents did flee and leave the home, the only home that they've ever known. Like, I can't emphasize the layer of trauma that they must have suffered to get us to where we are. And I feel like that is a perspective that I carry with me every day. And the fact that I get to raise my son, and he literally, anytime anyone asks me how my son is, I'm like, he is living his best life. He is living the life of a happy 5-year-old because of my parents. You know, so
felt that through my whole body. The foreboding feeling that you're talking about, like, you know, I'm in a place where I don't have to, you know, I'm not looking up, and I'm not worried about, you're saying, bomb dropping. I'm not worried about that level of anxiety, is so interesting to talk about, because I do think, as you're like, it's not that we don't have issues in our country here right now, right? But the way that it's communicated to us so often is as though it's as extreme and as significant for so many people. And so it's so interesting to be like, to have the experience of growing up with such a strong foundation amidst what feels like, well, I shouldn't say I know what it feels like, but it sounds as though it's, you know, building a strong foundation as you're trying to find where those roots can be replanted when you have to leave where your home is, creates a level of resilience that when other people are like, the sky is falling. You're like, no, the sky's good. Actually, we're just stressed over here. It
Yeah.
creates a level of critical thought, of nuance, but also of just bigger perspective, being able to see it from a different view. That's like, there's so much more to life than this thing. And we can overcome really challenging things that are even more extreme than this. And I think, especially at this moment right now, where all of the ways that information is being fed to us has it's playing into all the kind of biological triggers within us to be in survival mode all the time. And so creating space, I love how you said, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like that type of awareness, but also kind of centering and groundedness that has, it sounds like it's a part of your daily routine, is something that even in people that I coach, it's a really challenging thing when you get swept up in the machine of the hysteria of all the outrage that we have kind of fed to us all the time. And so I think it's such a beautiful invitation for folks that are feeling a level of, I don't know how to kind of keep going. It's like, okay, pay attention to what is here in this moment right now. And it doesn't mean that what happened isn't important. It doesn't mean what happened didn't shape you in some way, shape, or form, but also, the ability to be like, okay, my feet are on the ground and I'm okay right now, gives you so much strength to be able to handle whatever's coming, but also trust in the ability that you have to take those risks that you just talked about. I feel like that is such a powerful thing. And again, it's not always talked about. What tends to be talked about is, oh, you took the risk. It's talked about in a glorified way after it happened and it's all great, or you're about to take it, or, oh, I don't know. But really being able to stay with yourself as you're making those changes and as you're trying new things and exploring how to kind of create that life that allows for your son to be living the best life is such a really powerful testament to not only your parents, but I think also to you, and how much you've kind of taken that and evolved it even further. And so it's just a beautiful, I think, a lesson for all of us in this time of the outside world telling us that things are all over the place, to say, actually, you can find a level of centered foundation and groundedness if you look and create that space for yourself. And that trusting who you are, what you know, and what has been passed down to you that's wonderful, that can allow for space for those, miracles to happen in small and large ways. And so I think that that's such a powerful part of what you just said. Can you talk a little bit about how those experiences for you of finding your home, I mean, of kind of popping around and ending up in New York and being like, all right, this is how I'm doing what I'm doing. I've got my background in Toronto that I was doing this work, but like, here's where I am. I'm a stylist. This is how I'm doing it. And here's how I'm going to show up in the world and welcome other people to be working with me. Here are the types of people I want to work with. How have you kind of evolved over time to show up in your own style, to be welcoming in, who you want to be working with?
Great question. I think experience, I think that was an experimentation, honestly. When I moved, I've been here 16 years now, which is kind of insane to say. I mean, how did that happen? But when I came here simply because, my first trip here, Toronto and New York are not far at all.
Yeah.
So we drove with a friend back in 2000, I think it was.
Yeah.
And before we even entered the city, I fell in love. Like the energy, I felt the energy of the city. And I was like, what in the world? Like all I saw was still green. Yeah, it was still the highway. But we were just linked. Me and the city were linked. And I was like, okay, I don't know how or what, but I'm going to end up here.
Yeah.
And so when I moved, and even when I was in Toronto, I was very much in what I call the commercial industry of styling. So magazine stuff, corporate stuff. And that was really fun. And at the time, I think that was pretty much what you saw of stylists, working with celebrities and working with, just music videos and movies. Yeah. I had actually never worked on a movie, and it's still one of, I think I'd be traumatized working on a movie set because it is intense.
Yeah.
But, I realized a few years into doing that here, it just wasn't like, I wasn't fulfilled. I don't know, something was amiss. And so I just started kind of just searching, and I almost felt like I was failing at styling because I thought that the only way to be successful in this world, in this career, was to, you know, work with
Follow
a
the path.
celebrity,
Yeah.
follow the path that was widely like spoken about and that I saw. And so I kind of like stumbled upon a coach that introduced like another coach. And so I was in this coaching world all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I was made aware that I could do what I did differently, and that I could actually steer it. You know, I think a lot of I fell into this, right? Somebody asked me, it wasn't intentional. So I think a lot of the way I maneuvered myself in this arena was be steered, you know, just go with the flow and just, you know, wait for the phone call. And literally that was like how people spoke about it. They're like, you know, you got to answer every 212 number that comes through your phone because it could be an office, right? Like some company trying to hire you. So this whole new world that I was now kind of in and immersed in for the most part was like, oh, but you could like create your own website and you could talk to the people you want to talk to. And I was like, huh? What do they mean? Like, how's that possible?
Yeah.
And so I think, again, just because I was in this world, I was able to shift my mindset and understand that. And it also took like working with some of these women in this world to realize that this was the group of people that I really wanted to work with, because they had the same energy as I did in terms of really having a dream and wanting to pursue it. But what they lacked, and I lacked this too, you know, for a long time, is like, how do I show up the way I feel? How do I show up in my full awesomeness and really feel aligned between like the awesome self-development work and, you know, work to help the people that I'm helping? How do I do that on the outside? Because, you know, oftentimes we're stuck in this version of ourselves, usually around college, when we had the bandwidth and I guess the creative desire to just experiment and really get to know ourselves, because we were we did that. I think that we just instinctually did that in our 20s, early 20s. We were like, oh, I'm this, and this is how I want to express myself.
What do I want to be? That's the question you're allowed to ask then. Yeah.
So you're focused on you.
Yeah.
And then life happens and you're doing this over here. Maybe you settle down, maybe you have kids, and literally you don't even get to start with you. So I found that
even finish with you.
Where
are you? Yeah.
You get lost. Yeah. And so like a lot of people would go to magazines or look to celebrities or look to like runway shows to like start the journey of their personal style, but it always started outside of themselves. And I realized that this is where I could help women, like letting them see that this whole fashion industry is smoke and mirrors in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And they're dictating to us what we should be wearing. And I was like, no, I need to empower us so that we understand that we start with ourselves and we get to pick and choose. There's enough options out there where we can empower ourselves by understanding who we are and understanding our specific nuanced bodies and understanding that our bodies are not wrong. These designers just have a business model that they need to, you know, market and sell. And so that has nothing to do. Let's disconnect this idea that because one garment doesn't fit us, that we are somehow not
flawed.
Yeah, that we are flawed. And so that's how that started. And I was like, oh, this is what I was meant to do. Again, it was like a pivot I trusted and was like, this is what it was all about. Like this was the reason. And I honestly feel like I get to work with some of the most incredible people because they're out there doing, you know, the work that they're meant to do. And I help them really just feel like the best version of themselves and feel beautiful and confident as they do that work, which I think totally gives their work new energy and impact.
You know, it's so funny as you're saying, the first thing I wrote down earlier when you were talking about coming up to New York and like feeling that like resonant energy, that heartbeat of it all, whatever the kind of embodied feeling of like, oh, okay, this isn't even what I thought I was going to see to feel this, but I'm feeling it already. Is somebody told me a couple of years ago when I was talking about moving to New York, they were talking about how New York is like uniquely set up in such a way that it's on a bed of crystal. I don't know if I didn't know any of this stuff, but there is supposedly, and I'm somebody who's listening to this who knows this stuff is like, yeah, Nikki, it's this. I can't remember. Maybe it's like rose quartz or something, but it's on, I might not be it, but it's on something that has such a high frequency that you can't, which I feel like is we always hear of like the hustle of New York but there is something that is like, welcoming, but also amplifying and motivating, and it allows that kind of creative energy, which I thought was really cool.
That's amazing.
The other part of your story that I love to hear too is that the power of invitation, whether it be an overt invitation or a nudge, has been such a really powerful like poke for you as you're like, oh, okay, let's try this, let's try that. The other piece that I feel like was so like beautiful and I feel like doesn't get talked a lot about is that when you're working with women that are stepping into this kind of personal development space, whatever you call that, there's a whole bunch of different labels and words that are used in this space now. But the thing that we often don't talk about is how much vulnerability you are stepping into to create spaces around how personal development can be approached by other people and sharing your story. And so you kind of do feel naked as you're stepping into those spaces. And so a lot of times when in a world that, 10 years ago still was like, oh, self-help books, is minimizing this experience. Clothing tends to feel like armor instead of it being like, come on, welcome in. And I will say personally, from my experience of coming from corporate, like I had to try to find clothes that covered up so much of who I was. I had to try to disappear in my clothes so that you would take me seriously in my job. If I showed up too much, it was actually a problem. And so that was the overarching message. But any kind of experience you have from childhood all the way through of like how I'm being viewed through my clothing, how I'm showing up in the world, am I being made fun of? Am I being seen as a piece of meat? Am I not being seen as a person? All of those elements come through. Yeah, okay, you're a more mature version of yourself, but that's accrued experience with your relationship to how you show up in the world through what you put on your body. And so I'd love to hear kind of from you about how, as you're working with people that are stepping into what at least I think of as like a highly vulnerable place to not only be showing up for yourself, but hold space for other people to come with vulnerability, how powerful it is and how important it is to find that sweet spot of healing, or at least creating a space to write your story with how you relate to the clothing you put on your body and how you choose to show up in the world versus how you've had to kind of survive the experiences that you've had.
I mean, I think some of like usually the seeds of that are already there for a lot of the clients that reach out to me. So I actually prefer that because I think it's really hard to try and kind of convince somebody why this is important work. But I think it's just a feeling. I think it just comes, I think the clients that come to me have already been, they've already tried to bury it. They're just like, it's superficial. I don't need to be investing in this. I have other things I need to invest in. And then what happens is they just don't, for whatever reason, they feel, the imposter syndrome, and they just feel disconnected. And it is an intangible thing for a while. And then, I think they just realize, and I'm like, I almost think, the Western society has almost given the whole frivolous title to clothing for some reason. When you look at like different, it's so bizarre. And I think it probably has to do with control and, just kind of like being part of a community that just obeys.
I was gonna say obedience for sure.
Yeah. But like when you look at like almost every other country that they consider poor or third world or whatever, they're calling these incredible cultures all over the world. They don't necessarily have careers per se. They're herding sheep, but they're doing it in like these beautifully colorful, embroidered garments that are indicative of the culture that they love and want to pass down from generation. This can be found in so many different cultures. So it has nothing to do with the money that you're making. It really is a self-identity. Like where do you belong? Who do you belong? There's study that says that we are so wired to belong to our tribe. And that's really what survival is about for human beings, you know? So, you know, there's so much isolation, I think, in Western culture that I feel like where all of that kind of stems from. And at the end of the day, we want to just belong to ourselves first. And so like the next time I feel like, you know, that thought comes into, you know, my mind and our minds, I'm always like, let's look at like the Tibet culture, the like, there's so many, pick one and just study the history. And to this day, that is a huge part. And I'm not just talking about clothing, right? Like there are hairstyles, there's jewelry that they make a priority. That is how they show up every single day because it ties them to a history of where they come from and it tells a story. And that is 100% essential to our happiness and I think our survival.
So God, I'm feeling this all through my whole body. So I appreciate this. I feel like you're dropping nuggets of wisdom that are hitting in the heart at the right time and all those things. One of the pieces that I love that you were just saying of like, it feels like it's like a fundamental, it's a decision you're making every day of what you're putting on your body, how you're making yourself appear. And it is minimized, especially, let me say this, especially for women, it's minimized in a way that like you cannot have control. I mean, we talk about the things going on in the world. You're not allowed to have control of your body. You're not allowed to appreciate your body. You're not allowed, like there's all of this obedience, but also shame associated with any relationship you have with your body. But then also this kind of robotic nature of, you know, this is how everybody needs to show up in order to belong. Because if you appear different, that's how you're ostracized and not part of our tribe. Instead of it being like, actually, we all show up differently because it expresses who we are. And our tribe is the fact that we can show up as the unique people we are. Because as human beings, our DNA is different, our fingerprint, like we were actually programmed to not be exactly the same as each other, but we have been kind of, I really roboticized to believe, okay, even if you think about, you know, when you're talking about fashion magazines, there weren't that many fashion magazines initially where it was like, okay, so everybody needs to have this outfit, this haircut. I mean, Rachel keeps coming into my head of how like everybody got the same haircut. And it was like, but everybody's different. Why does everybody want to look exactly the same? And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that's what we do. And not giving the thought of, is that what I want to do? Does that fit me? Is that okay? And it's, you know, it's become part of our culture to bake in that obedience and that compliance and that kind of plugging into the matrix is a personal choice and an individual choice rather than it being like, maybe you're actually losing parts of yourself as you do that. And so part of what was coming to my brain is that as we talk about food and people putting the right food in their body to feel the best that they can, why do we not think about how we're absorbing the way that we show up in the world and the things that we're putting on our body and how we're presenting ourselves as being just as important in how we operate each and every day. And so I think there's something so powerful about stop looking just within the confines of North America. Look outside, look and see the power, because I think there is a part of this that is a jockeying for power and understanding that like there is actually a lot of power in owning your unique style, in owning the thing that makes you walk out in the world and feel completely powerful but unabashed of like, here's who I am and I can amplify the power that's within me, instead of saying, okay, I'll put this on and button this up so the power in me stays here so it doesn't bother anybody.
Yeah, and I do think that there is like one of the reasons I think I really attract women who are ready is, you know, there is something to entrepreneurship and, you know, like the level of self-development, that growth that has to occur to really be successful, and that not just in a monetary way, but on many different levels. It does come from entrepreneurship, or even like, you know, whatever you decide to do in your career. I do think like it's easier in a lot of ways to just, you know, okay, go to school, become a lawyer, you know, do this, collect a paycheck. You don't necessarily have to look at yourself. you know, and you're just kind of you're following the pattern, you're following like the you know, the kind of safe model of, I guess, living and life. But I think once you step into creating something for yourself, there's all this BS that you kind of have to clear through and work through and grow through. And it's that process that I feel like shines a light of like, oh, so who am I then? Like, how do I want to show up, and what, you know, so if this isn't aligning with me, how do I do that? It can be overwhelming for sure, right? It's like I always say, like, you know, to those of us that struggle with personal style, like there should be no shame, really and truly, because it's a skill. And if you haven't been taught that or shown differently, like, you know, the same way I don't beat myself up over the fact that I don't know how to code, you know, I haven't been taught. You know, I haven't gone to school for it, or whatever the case may be. I think that's like really just taking that away and understanding that just because you are with yourself all the time, how you come to understand what it takes to kind of develop a personal style that is aligned with, you know, how you feel on the inside is a skill.
Oh yeah, and it really is unpacking so much that you don't realize is tied to it.
Right.
And so it can feel really heavy, and you're like, why does it feel heavy to put clothes on? You're like, because it's not just about that. It's you giving yourself permission to like see who you are and step into that. It's really funny. You know, one of the things I talk a lot about in the podcast I have, but with coaching a lot, I usually start with like something, maybe you've heard of this, me search, like something that's about research about you or me, that we live with ourselves all the time, but we're never given permission to actually understand how we operate and what we need. We just take for granted that we're in this skin suit and we're walking around and we have, you know, all of these ways that we were taught that we're supposed to operate that we're not encouraged, especially not in like our formal education. There's no class about, you know, who am I? What do I want? What do I do? Who is this? Like, how do we view the world? How do I have an understanding of my place in the world? Or even, you know, what is relationship? How do I interact with other people? There's no formal education about that. And so it has this unspoken, oh, you should be perfect at it, that then builds in this level of judgment when you aren't able to, or when the way you do it is not working for you. And so I think there is a part of this in the same line is like, well, put clothes on. I taught you how to tie your shoes. Now you should know how to do everything else. It's like, it's so much more than that. And it's so much more about how you are allowed to show up in the world as who you are. It's a component of it, but especially in a country that is so, you know, I went to Lisbon in the fall and I was shocked walking down the street and be like, nobody's looking at me at all. Like I could be walking down the street naked and no one would care.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, is that like a Lisbon thing? You know, and realizing like in America, and it depends where you are. I've been in Boston for a very long time, so it's its own flavor of this. But there is this level of comparing yourself to other people and trying to figure out where you fit in the hierarchy that makes it so no matter what you're wearing, if that's the energy around you, you are aware of how you fit with others. And so this idea of, I just put on clothes, it doesn't matter. It's like, right, but how you're showing up in the world and having that, whether it be spoken or unspoken interaction, is actually impacting how you're walking through life, how you're interacting with people. And the permission to be able to say, I actually want to show up and be able to walk through the world, not being like, oh, don't look at this, don't notice that, don't do this, or, okay, this is good enough, I guess. It's nobody cares about this. And really being able to step into, oh, this is who I am. And I get to walk through the world as myself without even worrying about my clothes. Because I do think there is a part of it that's like, to worry about your clothes is frivolous, as you're saying, which is its own thing, because we could say that about pretty much every way we spend our time, but this is the place that it tends to be anchored in. So I'd love to hear from you about the power of, as you're watching people do this, as you're watching people step out into the world. I mean, I worked with you for 2 seconds at a shoot, and I remember you being like, wear this, wear that, wear this, and you being like, okay, cool. There's the permission of here's the things you have, try this, put this on, and I can see you in that. I watched you walk in the room, but also the like, play around with it, test it out, see how it feels. All that permission around something, if you haven't been given space for it, really is a powerful thing, whether it be that that's the outfit you wear all the time, or just shifting your mindset around how you think about, how can I play around with this stuff? How have you watched as you do this with your clients, how that has shifted and changed how not only they're showing up within their, within their style, but how they're showing up within the world?
Yeah, I think it's been it's an honor actually to just see that growth in my clients, especially the clients that like, when we meet, it's very much, I hate shopping, I hate clothes, I just don't want to think about it. Like there's so much resistance. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, let me like, just be open and trust me, and we'll make this happen. But I think it's like, and this is like obviously, right? These clients, most of my clients have this level of confidence. They believe in their work, right? That's how they've garnered success at the level that they've achieved it at the time that we meet. But there's this extra layer of like belief in themselves. Like I can't even, it's almost like I don't even know if there's a word for it, but it's just this like, when you're like trying to make something fit and then it clicks in place. It's very much that energy. And then literally it's projected outwards, right? Because they feel, you can't help it. Like it really does shift how you feel. And then that becomes like this magnetic, aspirational, transferable energy to the people that they're speaking to, their people. And that just grows because it's like, oh, like this is almost like us, like we talk about New York, like, oh, I can't help but like be drawn to this place, to this person. And then your message lands more deeply with your people all of a sudden. And so it really just amplifies the voice that they've been creating, to not only just to another level, but to more people, to the people that are waiting for the gift and, the work that they provide. And I just, even with myself, I feel like, that's why I was always like, I don't know why my friend even thought of me. I did not dress well back then. I was still trying to figure myself out, like in the industry, as you said, it's very much like no shape, no curves, straight up and down, brunette, blonde, like all these things that did not, like none of which looked like me. And I was like, so what am I supposed to do? How do I show up? And so I think it's just the experimentation for me was like, oh, let's try this and let's see how it feels. Because it really is instant. You can tell instantly if something is, feels like it's aligned or if it's not. But I just think it's and then watching these same clients who are like, I hate shopping, I don't, I hate clothes, I don't want to have to worry about it, like enjoy going out and like getting new things to build their wardrobe on their own and put things together. That's just like, who are you? Like, you're like, it's happened because now they've seen themselves in a new way and they're like, oh, I have the blueprint now. This is what's possible. And they go from there, which is really obviously super, super, I don't know, inspiring, and just it really is an honor to just be a part of that transformation for clients.
It's like, oh, there you are. You've been here this whole time. I didn't know. And it's like, it's connecting them with a part of themselves that's in separate, which I think is so powerful. It's funny. Sometimes when I'm doing these interviews, I get so excited to talk to the person. I don't even ask them about their other story. And I feel like that's kind of what you were touching on about stepping into the industry and being like, this is what you told me the prototype is. I mean, that's not me. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. If there's, an experience in that of like, hey, I feel like this isn't me. You're telling me this isn't me, but I could do all this stuff. How has that experience of not necessarily being homogenous benefited you? It sounds like it really has, especially as we step into what I hope is a new era of how we interact with our style as we're coming back out of quarantine.
I mean, I definitely felt like I didn't fit in per se, like, in this industry for a long time, because like they were even coming here like, oh, you should want to go to a fashion show. And I had already at that point known like, I don't know if I vibe with the people, not everybody, but like just kind of the general goal. It was really to be seen. I'm like, I just want to see the clothes and I can see them better online. So I'm
Yeah.
just like, I had no desire to like, but then sometimes I'm like, maybe I should want this more.
Mm,
Or even like, and I will say too, at the time, I feel like, when I moved here, I had to start from the beginning. So I had to start assisting before I was doing my own gigs. And
yeah.
every stylist that I assisted was a white woman.
Yeah.
Um, I, there was a guy, but he only did guys, a black man that I could have, but he only did men, and I wanted to do both.
Yeah.
So it was really tough to just even like, have exposure to the different, ways that this industry could be.
Yeah.
So it was, and it's New York, right? So it was like, oh, you need to be able, like, even to be repped by an agency here in New York, you had to like be at the top of your game, like working. I'm like, if I did that, I don't need you, so it was
Yeah.
very,
Right.
there was a lot of ways where I'm like, maybe I don't fit into this. That's where the doubt came in, where I was like, maybe I'm not meant to do this. Maybe I'm,
Yeah.
maybe this isn't for me. And I really felt like I was like giving up on something for a long time. It was a tough year. But then, and then that was like in the coaching kind of world, when I stepped into that in this, during this period of time, there
Yeah.
was so much empowerment around, what makes you different is the thing that you
Yeah.
should focus
Yeah.
on. And I was like, oh,
Like, I
okay,
got that.
I
You're all
got
telling me I've
that.
got that.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to, I felt like I had to like, I really, and that's when I knew it didn't feel good, because I was like, well, I don't want to bury this. Because I remember just growing up in my small town in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, where I felt like, when I felt like I didn't belong, I clung to my culture. And that in a lot of, so often really helped
Mhm.
me, gave me the foundation to like, no, you come from a dope people, and
Yeah.
like that helped me then. And for, it was a little murky for a while when I moved here. And then I was like, oh, okay, because I don't like the industry. I don't particularly like the fashion industry. I don't necessarily care what the trends are. I I just, I think who you are, that's where I start, and that's what I care about. And that was literally the thing, right? The thing that made me more impactful in the work that I do, and also just happier, obviously,
For sure.
in the work that I do.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like what's happening in the world right now is something that that a lot of it's like landing in the kind of public consciousness more now, but it has been coming for a long time. This idea that we've been following rules and following rules and following rules and following rules, and being surprised that we're unhappy, and
Right.
realizing that, like, okay, maybe the problem is that we're following the wrong rules and that we're doing the wrong thing. Not that we're doing it wrong. It's that actually the track that we're on is broken, but we just keep ignoring the broken parts and keep pushing through, and then being like, what did I do wrong here? And this experience of saying, well, you already told me that even if I got on the track, I wasn't exactly what you wanted, or I wasn't exactly going to be able to show up. That, like, I'm not going to say this. I used to have a person on my team that would be sending me things that were like, 40-year-old white dudes were being able to do it for their business. And I'm like, right, but I will never, like, there's nothing we can do to make me that.
Yeah.
So I understand it. We could try, but the part of this is that who I am is not meant to fit in that space. And what we're having right now is, obviously, the last couple of years, we've had to kind of come in within ourselves, inside our home, figure out a whole lot of like, okay, who am I within this world? How do I show up? What am I willing to put myself in bodily harm to engage in? Bodily harm. You know what I mean? What am I willing to take a risk for that way? But also, now we're in a space where we've had so much more conversation about the fact that we have so many different people living on this earth right now. And we have only been seeing the world through a very thin lens. And so as you think about how I feel like you're talking about how you've approached styling as the modern way of how we operate in this world. And the way that fashion has been like, well, you have to do it this way and you have to come and sit in the front row at this show and you have to have made it to get this level of access is such an old traditional way of doing things that it's just not the way we operate right now. It's kind of like how there are companies that are like, even though the pandemic's happening, you have to come into the office or we'll fire you. Okay. It's just not, you don't have those levels of power anymore. There is so much more choice. And so as you're thinking about, again, people stepping back out in the world as themselves, and whether they're choosing clothes that they've had in their closet or they're choosing styles that they have in their closet, or it's like, I need to find, like, I feel like a completely different person than I was 2 years ago. How do you kind of think about that reentry period, or the kind of meeting yourself again or meeting yourself anew with the pairing of companies kind of getting a little bit more on the inclusive design, offering you things that can fit your body rather than you trying to change your body to fit into those clothes?
I don't think that I approach it any differently. If anything, I just feel like, coming out of this, and I'm saying out of because we're
speaking
out
into
of it.
existence.
Yes.
I'm with you. Yeah.
I think I think I've never been busier. And I think that was a result of, understanding that we have been given another chance in a lot of ways and a new way of doing things. Like, I think, part of like being still and having all that downtime was like, were forced to sit with ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings and all the things that we are so used to kind of pushing to the side when it's go, go, go. And, and I just came back from a retreat in Italy. And I'm, again, like, I've lived in Rome. I know I was only 4, but, and I've been to many parts of Europe. I've been to Portugal as well. And I'm like, no matter what year it is, you're like, there's a group of people that just refuse to do life in a way that affects their quality of life. And there's something just so admirable about that, because we push through so much here, and sometimes it's like, why like, at the end of the day, like, what am I going to get out of this, like. So it's really, I think what like you spoke about, I think it was just kind of like, oh, I have options, I don't have to do it this way. I think a lot of people came to that realization. And so if anything, more people were just awakened to that idea, and were like, and I have had actually a lot of people who are in corporate, whether it be tech or law, who were just like, I'm in this, industry of just men, or a bunch of men. And I'm like, I refuse to just try and, kind of conform to them. Like, they show up in jeans and t-shirt. And they're like, I'm different. I'm a female and that's my power. And I want to show up, in the best version of myself. So I think that has been, definitely a silver lining of COVID, because I do feel like more people have been awakened to this idea that, like, listen, we only get one shot at this thing. And how can I be as authentic as possible doing whatever it is that I'm doing? And I feel like, I don't know, like, imagine what the world would be, right? If we could just, if we were taught that, and just that was ingrained in, the way we live our lives.
Instead of it being seen as something to be punitive about, it was actually celebrated. It was something that says, oh my God, that's a wonderful thing for you to be able to tap into your inherent power.
Exactly.
It actually helps all of us do the same. Well, I will say this, I am so grateful that our paths crossed. I am so excited, because I think that what you just mentioned of that activation for so many people that haven't really had the time and space to understand the me and that list we talked about earlier on, like the how I feel and how I'm showing up in the world has never even been part of my to-do list, because it's way further down and I'll never get there. That we're in that space where there's permission, but also there's like lived experience and reflection that's saying, hold on, in order for me to do all those to-dos, I actually need to take care of myself. And so I am so excited for everybody that gets the chance to work with you, gets the chance to just be in community with you. And thank you so much for being here. Is there any, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they are like, Elsa, hi, I want to come hang, teach me all the things, let's do this?
My website is probably the most, kind of steadfast thing that will be around, and that's elsaissac.com. I do hang out on Instagram, probably not as regularly as I could be, which is Elsa Issac, right? It's I try to live my life in real time too, so that's always tough. But lots of, if you sign up on my website, there's lots of resources that get sent to you, and we have a monthly newsletter as well, to just kind of really, if nothing else, to just remind yourself that however different you are, it's actually not only okay, but it's your superpower, and to remember that as you move around in this world.
Yes, you're speaking my language so deeply. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited that everybody just got to meet you. And I can't wait to bear witness to all the magic that's coming as we come out of this, because I will speak it into existence right alongside you.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Nikki.
Of course. Hey, wasn't Elsa so wonderful? This episode has me thinking so much about how I want to show up in the world, how I want to style myself and my life in a way that I can have my light shine through brighter than ever before. If you are somebody that came from any of the spaces that Elsa and I were talking about, where your external style was set up in such a way that you wanted to blend in and you wanted to wear a uniform, I hope that this episode gave you maybe a little bit of permission to play around with, hey, how do I want to show up? How would I show up a little differently? Even if it's adding one piece to your wardrobe that feels like you, that feels maybe a little bit different, but can honor who you are and how you want to show up in this world. Maybe it's a different hairstyle. Maybe it's a different way that you're showing up with your makeup, or how you're doing your nails, or different shoes that you're wearing. I don't know, but giving yourself permission to just play around a little bit, because it is so important for us to be able to understand the impact of how we show up in this world is really all the different things that we put on our bodies, put in our bodies, the interactions that we have, and the energy that we exchange. For anybody that's interested in learning a little bit more about the special crystals under New York City, I will make sure to include a couple articles in our show notes, and those are over at nikkyinnocent.com/podcast, and you'll be able to click over on Elsa's episode to get the customized links for this episode. If you are listening on a podcast platform that allows you to rate and review, please do. It's so important for us to hear from you. So if you have any insights that you'd like to share, you can definitely put them in the review, or you can reach out to us again over on nikkyinnocent.com/podcast. We have a button on there called Join the Conversation, and we would love to hear from you. If you have questions, if you have stories related to this episode or any other, or if you want to hear something from us that we're not talking about and you think we should, definitely let us know. Especially if you have somebody that you really, really want us to invite on. Definitely let us know. I hope that you are doing well, and I will catch you on the next episode.